Stateline school districts are trying to meet demands to hire speech-language pathologists. But with the lack of pathologists in education, things are a bit difficult.
WIFR reporter Adalia Young shares how Rockford Public Schools are dealing with this shortage.
There's constantly turnaround. It creates kind of an uneasy environment to work in.
School districts are implementing more speech therapy programs into their curriculums, but finding speech pathologists to fill the void that exists in education is becoming more difficult.
Yes, there's a huge struggle to find speech pathologists right now. We are down about 25% of what we need, and so we are getting by with the staff that we have. But for us, that's about 13 and a half people that we have, or allocations we have not been able to fill.
Anna Canone is a speech-language pathologist program director at NIU. She says the need for speech therapy programs is growing because parents are realizing the importance of communication.
So I think there's a growing awareness about our field and what we can do. And I also think that COVID-19 really exacerbated the need for speech pathology services.
Canone says the gap to hire enough pathologists will be filled soon, with a new wave of college students showing interest in the field.
In fact, we often have way more applicants apply than we have spots for in our graduate program. And we're actually hoping to begin admitting more students because of that demand in the field.
In Rockford, Adalia Young, WIFR News.
Rockford Public Schools is looking to hire speech pathologists who are interested in working in special education. You can find more information on WIFR.com to apply.